and welcome to the Saturday conversation from the Avon Valley Churches, which are a group of 7 churches on the northwest corner of the ancient and beautiful New Forest surrounding Fordingbridge. We're talking to you this morning from the parish of Breamore, really, which is one of the churches where I'm one of the church wardens, and I'm welcoming this morning David and Anne Tappin, who are parishioners in Breamore and worship at Breamore Church. So, good morning, David and Anne.
Good morning, Mary.
Thank you for joining me this morning. Now, I know that you now live in Breamore, but I know you haven't lived there for that many years. So, I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about your background and how you've come to live in this part of the country.
Okay, well, shall I start? Well, we're both Londoners. We were both born in 1936, which seems an awfully long time ago, doesn't it? I was born in Eltham and Anne was born in Lewisham. And then until after the war, we were both living in the area of Orpington, that sort of vicinity of South London. And I suppose the next thing to talk about where we got together is where we met and how we met. And that was at a tennis club in 1955, August 1955, bank holiday weekend. And I remember I was most impressed with the size of Anne's feet, which are absolutely tiny. And she was most unimpressed with my dirty fingernails because I'd just been working on my car, my 1934 Morris 10. And so that's where we met.
Somebody asked me who he was, and I said, I don't know, he's got dirty nails. Very impressive.
Well, that's something to remember, isn't it?
something to look back on with great pleasure anyway.
Yes.
And we finally tied the knot in 1960. We were married in St Paul's Church, Crofton, where we both worshipped at the time. And we lived in Farnborough. That's Farnborough, Kent, not the airfield one. And after a couple of years there, we bought a house. We had a house built. We bought some land and had a house built in Chipstead, which is just south of Sevenoaks. No, it's not. It's north of Sevenoaks. It's north of Sevenoaks. It's on the M25 now, but the M25 hadn't been thought of at that particular time. And we lived there. Our children were born there. Elizabeth was born in 1962, and
Jonathan is 64.
64, and Elizabeth lives in Fordingbridge, and Jonathan lives in Poole. So we're very fortunate. We've got them quite close by.
Yeah.
We have 4 grandchildren. 2 of them are actually step-grandchildren. John's on his first marriage, but his wife's second marriage, so the children aren't actually his. But we treat them very much as our grandchildren. And our grandchildren run, the youngest is Robert, who lives in Fordingbridge, and he's 25 now. And the oldest is Sarah, who's the stepdaughter of John, and she's 33, 32, 33, something like that. So they don't seem like grandchildren, they seem more like children to us because they grew up with us and looked after Elizabeth's 2, children. Robert and Bryony, for 2 days a week. And while Liz went back to work at the Ordnance Servo, where she still works now. And so having them with us, particularly after we retired in 1996. And they were quite young then, so we used to enjoy their company greatly, and we're still really good friends with them all, which is lovely. That's pretty much us, our background. As far as our lives are concerned, we've moved around quite a lot. After when we were living in Chipstead, I was working for a company in Beckenham, and they were American owned, and the Americans had another organisation in a new town in Scotland, in Glenrothes in Fife. And after I'd been working there for a few years, they decided they would like us to all move to Fife. And so in 1969, New Year's Eve 1969, which was not a good day to be moving to Scotland, I can tell you. But anyway, we moved there, and it was rather fun because we took the cars up on the train And when we arrived at Edinburgh, we were the only car in Scotland with snow on the roof because we brought it up with us from Kent.
Which we had snow every year then. We don't now, but
No.
they did then.
So anyway, we bought a house in the new town. It was one of the biggest houses in the street, actually, in the town, because obviously houses were much cheaper in Scotland than they were in Sevenoaks that we'd moved from. And it was it was rather funny because we hadn't really realised that when we moved there that we were actually moving into quite an exclusive area. I mean, we had one side of us, we had the chief executive of the Glenrothes Development Corporation. The other side, we had a doctor, and next door to him was was one of the board members of the Fife Water Board. And it was we didn't realise where we were moving. It was called Carnoustie Gardens. Actually, there were about 7 houses there. And it wasn't until we moved there we discovered it was locally known as Carsnooty Gardens, because all of the upper crust people lived there, and we were only about 36 when we moved there. So it was a rather strange situation for us. And Anne was invited to a coffee morning there, and they all sat wearing hats in a circle and took it in turns to talk. It was a very, very strange place for us.
And in Kent, I was used to coffee mornings that lasted till we went to collect the children at 3.
Yeah, that's right.
So very smart.
Slightly different change then for you.
Yeah.
With the hand like that around your cup. It was quite different. I didn't have a hat.
That's right. But unfortunately, the move to Scotland wasn't a success for our company because we were encouraged to go there with free rent and rates in a brand new factory for the first 3 years. But because our customer base was still around London, whereas we could see 3 customers a day from our offices in London, visiting them again from Scotland involved flying from Turnhouse to either Heathrow or Gatwick, and then hiring a car and only seeing 1 client, and the cost of sales was colossal. Yeah. So after the free rent and rates period, I suddenly realised the company was struggling, so it was time to leave, and we came back to England. I had a job with a company in Christchurch, and we lived in Ringwood for 3 years before we moved to God's Hill. We moved to God's Hill in '76. I lived in Newgrounds for 12 very happy years there in Rose Cottage, and then it isn't called Rose Cottage anymore. And then we moved to God's Hill Wood from there, so sort of South God's Hill to North God's Hill, and we finally ended up here in Breamore. It's about 7 years ago. So that's the story of our lives, really, in a fairly concise form. Anything to add?
No, I'm very happy here.
Yes, very, very happy. We thought we were downsizing. We had 3 acres in God's Hill Wood, and we've only got half an acre here. So in theory, a sixth of an acre, 1/6 of the size of the garden would only be a 1/6 of the work, wouldn't it? You'd think. But it seems to be just as much work. So I'm not too sure that downsizing was the right word for it. No. Anyway, that's unless you've got any other questions to ask about our past, well,
I just remember when you lived in God's Hill, in the second place, you had a garden full of daffodils, didn't you? In the spring.
Yes. We've been thinking about that, and the bluebells, and the bluebells. Yeah,
and the bluebells that would be coming out now, I suppose, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been.
And you haven't got quite so many where you are now.
No. So. One year, our gardener had been telling us that one of his other clients had got 2,000 daffodils in their garden, and Anne, you can't believe this. I'm going to tell you this. I still don't believe it now, but it's true. Anne actually counted ours, and we had over 6,000.
Good grief, that's amazing.
It's quite a sight.
I imagine they're still there. I don't know.
I hope so. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for telling us that.
Okay.
Perhaps you can go on and tell us then, how has faith been important all through your married lives? Because I realised when you were talking there that I think I've worked it out correctly, that you've been married for over 60 years?
Yes, that's
61.
We celebrated our 61st anniversary last April, this last month on the 16th.
Oh, well, congratulations on that. That's amazing.
It's quite an achievement, isn't it?
It's a wonderful achievement.
Still on speaking terms as well. It's amazing.
So perhaps you can just tell us a little bit about how your faith then has helped you throughout life.
Well, used to belong to a church group when we lived in Orpington before I married David. I was 14 and I saw the lights then. So I've been part of the church for all that time. What about you?
Yes, I had I had the big dawning when I was in hospital in 1973, and went down to the chapel after I'd had some surgery, and feeling very sorry for myself, and I saw all these other people who were so much worse off than I was, and I felt really ashamed of myself, and felt very emotional. And the chaplain there in Southampton Hospital came to talk to me because he could see I was troubled, and that's really where the light properly dawned. Although I'd been a churchgoer, I was confirmed when I was at school, but it was really just because that's what you did, rather than that I had a very strong faith at that time. But certainly it was made very strong for me by that experience.
Yeah. And was that when you were living in Christchurch, was it, you said?
No, that's when we moved to Rose Cottage. We moved there in 76. And I had this medical problem very soon after we moved to that house.
Yeah.
So that was 1976 then.
And was that when you started attending God's Hill at St.
Yes, St. Giles became very involved in St. Giles.
You did, yes. Yeah.
It's not what it was. Obviously, things have changed so much in God's Hill. You know, when we first moved there, the school was there, and Anne did some teaching at the school, and we became, involved in it. I was the sort of bricks and mortar person there, and did a lot of refurbishment work, painting and re-sanding the floors, and putting new floor hinges on, and all sorts of stuff like that.
And we organised the mural.
Oh yes, the mural. The mural in the wall there at God's Hill. That was something for the millennium.
But nobody will see it now. Yeah. Now the church.
Perhaps you can just explain that for people who won't know it actually. Can you just explain
it's certainly worth it. I don't know if St. Giles is now open all the time. I don't believe it is, but if it
is, no.
But if anybody wanted to go in there, I'm sure they'd find somebody who'd have a key. But there's this beautiful mural which was done by Mandy for us, and it's not just behind the altar; it's round the sides of the altar area as well, and it depicts St. Giles himself, who was a hermit, and he had the story was that he had a hind which he looked after, and looked after him, provided him with milk, and some hunters came and tried to shoot the hind, and it ended up with the arrow as depicted in the mural in the back of St. Giles's hand. And if you go there and see it, you'll see him with his hind and the arrow in his hand, and the hunters appearing, and the whole scene is of the New Forest, and it's really beautiful mural, well worth a look.
It is, yes, yeah.
But that was I mentioned earlier that when we moved there, the school was still in operation, and in fact, Anne and I helped to run the youth club. There was enough children there to run quite a good youth club, and gradually they got older, and more children didn't come. The school closed, and the whole place changed so much. That's life, I'm afraid, isn't it? It never stays the same, however much you wish it did.
Yeah. And you say, Anne, that you were a teacher at the school. How long were you there for?
I was only doing odd times when there was staff were ill here. I didn't work full time here, but I went round all the schools. I came to Breamore, I went to Fordingbridge,
Hyde.
And Hyde. Yes, I got a job at Hyde because I can't think what her name was. The headmistress needed help. She was allowed to help for 2 hours a week, and so I went up and did that for her so she could do her work in the office. And so yes, I was.
Anne was doing quite a bit of supply teaching there, and in fact that carried on until we decided to start our own company. I'd been working for a company in Dorchester in data communications, And what I learned there, I was general manager there, and what I learned there about data communications and the large number of clients we had encouraged us to start our own company, which we started in 1983 in Poole. And
another man who
was my works manager, and we teamed up with him and his wife, formed a company, which is still going strong. And we sold up to retire when we were 60. And so that was what, 96. So we've been retired for quite a long time.
Very nice.
Which has led us to doing all sorts of exciting things. Travelled a lot.
Yeah.
And that was as I mentioned earlier, when we were looking after our grandchildren. So I joined the looking after grandchildren tribe as well after we retired. Anne was working 2 or 3 days of work a week down in Poole. She was
supply work.
Company. With a company.
Yes.
Started. She was our company secretary and looked after all the VAT and all those, payroll and all the rest of it.
I'd never done anything like that before. I was just told that that's what I was going to be doing.
You're obviously very adaptable.
Well, obviously. It's amazing now.
Well, it was actually very good for us because I could work. Anne used to have her computer at home quite a bit, and I could work from home as well because I was the only mechanical engineer there. Everybody else were electronic engineers, and I did a lot of prototyping and all that sort of thing. I've got quite a well-equipped machine shop, my workshop, and so I used to work at home quite a bit. And that was a jolly good way of introducing ourselves to retirement. Some people. I can remember one of our neighbours, her husband retired, and I said, "How's it going?" And she said, "It's like having 2 husbands on half the money." But for us, it was something we just
worked well.
Worked towards, and it worked out really well for us.
Yeah. Right. Mandy said, "How are you going to put up with David all that time?" And I said, "Well, I work with him. I'm used to it." No change.
That was good. Now, I also know, David, that you have quite an interesting hobby that has taken you really all around the world. So would you like to tell us a bit about that?
This is where I get very boring, I'm afraid. I was an aero modeler. I started when I was 11. So that was 1947. My father had a next door neighbor who was a very well-known aero modeler, and he encouraged me to become interested in making model airplanes, and so that's where it all started. And I hadn't stopped really. Stopped for a short time when we were first married, but as soon as the children came along, I had an excuse to get involved again. And I've been, ever since that, I've been doing quite a lot of admin for clubs and that sort of thing. I've been a member of the Wimborne Model Aero Club since we moved here in 73. We first moved down from Scotland, and I was one of the original members of the club. We have a lovely flying site up on Cranbourne Chase, and fairly near Sixpenny Handling, and I've been a member of that club and done all sorts of other things ever since. I got invited. Our son, just a little bit more detail. Our son also became a very successful aero modeler. He flew for the country in a couple of world championships, doing what's called aerobatics. It's very precision pursuit, and he started doing that before he had a car. So I was his chauffeur, and I used to take him to all of these competitions all over the country, and stood about all day waiting to take him home again. And I thought, well, this is no good. I'll get involved. So I became involved in the administration side of these competitions, and eventually ended up as an international judge in aero modeling, and that got me an invitation to join a German organization, the International Jet Model Committee, which ran world championships, and from 1995, just slightly before we retired, I was judging for them in world championship events all over the world, and our son flew in several of those, and in fact was in that event was a 3 times world champion. I used to not judge him. I stood back and let the other judges do the work for when he was judging, to make sure there was no family interference in his success. That's really what got us going, because we've always enjoyed travel, but traveling at somebody else's expense is even better.
You had to pay for me.
I had to pay for Anne, but I was on expenses. So we always used to add a holiday to wherever we went. And I've just made a note. I had it here of all the countries we visited, and 1995 Germany, and it went every 2 years. England, Austria, Thailand, South Africa, Hungary, Northern Ireland, Israel, United States, Switzerland, Germany again, Finland. The last event was in China. I didn't make that one, but all the other ones I was the chief judge for all of those events, and also on the organising committee who set everything up. So it was a good time.
You certainly have travelled with it,
yes,
and made some very good friends.
And how have you been able to join in it, Anne, really?
Well, I go too. And yes, I'm just in the audience, as it were.
Well, all of the people involved in it always took their families, because it was a good opportunity travelling like that. Silly to go there and just spend a week flying in model aeroplane without taking in the country a bit. So we would always add a week or two onto it. And we took to places. I mean, I don't think we'd ever have gone to Thailand. And we hired a car and driver after the event and went right up to the northern border. In fact, just so we could get in our passports, we went into Burma for half an hour, and also across the Mekong River into Laos.
Riding elephants. Lovely.
We'd never have done things like that if it hadn't been for the jets.
So it really opened up some opportunities then.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. And another good one was South Africa. We went up to the Kruger Park for 10 days after the event, and that was a wonderful experience as well. And it was quite funny because we were up there with our car and driver, and suddenly this big coach went past and lots of people shouting and waving, and it was all of the Swiss team, about 30 of them who'd been at the event, and they'd gone up there as well. So yes, we did a lot of meeting people in unexpected places.
Yeah, and you say you've made a lot of friends, from these around the world, I suppose.
Yes, you still see them, don't
you? We do. Yes, we do. It's
good. Do you still keep in touch with quite a lot of these people? Or?
Yes, our Christmas card list is mostly people that we've met on these events, I think.
Yes.
That seems to be like that. Because, of course, I was working, but Anne was with all the other wives and the children of the families as well. So they got well looked after. The host countries of these events would lay on coach tours and visits to places, for the families, keep them interested. One of the events back in 2013 was in Switzerland, and we were in the name of the place, Moringa. Is it Moringa? Name like that. It's where meringues come from, and it's also where the falls are, where Sherlock Holmes fell with his. Yes, and all of that was there. That's the sort of thing that used to happen. People would find a connection for us and take us to see these things. It was really good.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
So I suppose in the last year, though, you haven't been able to do very much, have you?
That's right. I thing about aero modelling is it's a 24-hour-a-day thing. You can be designing them while you're sitting by the fireside with your pen and pencil, making them in the workshop when there's time available, and if not that, then out flying them. So it's kept me busy.
It should have been in Austria, but of course it had to be cancelled.
Yes.
Yeah, we would have been in Austria around this time this year.
Yeah.
For the event.
Oh well.
The next one will now be in Italy in 2012. Yeah, so that's something else to look forward to.
Good. All right. Well, thank you for telling us about that. That is most interesting. Can you tell me, I know you are regular readers at church. You read the lessons for us quite often. Do you have a favourite passage that perhaps means something to you from the Bible, either of you or both of you?
Do you want to go first?
Yes, let me find it.
Okay, well, for me, it has to be Luke 10, the Good Samaritan. Always makes me think of Anne, because she's one of these good people who always puts everybody else first. She's famous for it. So it's
Yeah, that's lovely.
so that's mine.
And mine is Luke chapter 2, verses 1 to 19, about the birth of Christ.
Yeah.
That you read at Christmas. And I've often read that at church on Christmas.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. That goes through the whole story, doesn't it? Really.
Yes.
Yes. That's lovely. And does reading the Bible mean a great deal to you?
Well, I don't read it every day.
No.
I usually read about murders.
You'll find some of those in the Bible.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. But it's nice to have the opportunity to read. We used to read also at God's Hill at St Giles.
Yes, you did. Yes.
And it's a lovely experience.
Mm. Yeah, it is good. Yes. Yeah.
Once you've got over the nerves.
Well, you always seem to read very nicely. So.
We even had a microphone last Sunday. That was a real treat.
Yes, yes. Andy's done a good job there with those,
Yeah.
hasn't he? You've made good. It was very good, wasn't it?
It was.
Well, I suppose we better think about finishing this now. And thank you very much for talking today.
Right.
Finally, then, can you tell us what's your favourite hymns? Have you each got a favourite hymn?
All things bright and beautiful.
And is there a
Having
reason
been
for
a
that?
primary school teacher,
Yes.
that features a lot at school.
Yes, yes, it does, doesn't it? Yes.
Yes. For me, it's John Bunyan's "To Be a Pilgrim." Who would valiant be? In fact, when we moved to Scotland, we felt a bit like that, and we named our house Pilgrim's Way.
Oh, so that's got a real connection with you, then, hasn't it?
That's right. Yes.
And that was a connection where we lived in Sevenoaks, because we were near by the Pilgrim's Way.
Oh, the Pilgrim's Way there, yes. Yeah. Oh, lovely.
Gipstead.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me today and telling us a bit about your lives. It's been very interesting indeed. And thank you for those who've joined in to listen to us today. Please come again. We're here each weekday, Monday to Saturday at 10 a.m. The weekdays are thought for the day, and on Saturday, the Saturday conversation. And then Sunday at 10 a.m, one service from one of our churches is also still streamed. So we look forward to seeing you at any time. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Mary. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.